Okay, morning everyone. Welcome to day 2 of New Video Frontiers. My name is Vincent Flood. I'm the editor-in-chief at VideoWeek. It has been our first ever Video Week. It's been a quite long event for us. We've had speed networking on day 1 on Monday. We had cross-industry roundtable on Tuesday. Yesterday was the first day of content. It's been a huge learning experience for us, and yeah, I think we've come around to the idea that digital events can be fun, can be very useful. All that said, I think we're all looking forward to getting back in the room with each other and having a drink. Okay, so just to guide you through the content for today, if you were here yesterday and you saw me doing this, apologies, it's a little bit repetitive, but there are housekeeping bits that are a little bit unavoidable if we're going to have everyone understand what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my presentation. Hopefully you're able to see that all right. So, as I said, welcome to day 2. Particularly welcome to people tuning in from around the world. Yesterday we had people on the chat from Germany, Italy, South Africa. We know that people are sort of getting up early in the morning or staying up late at night to watch this. So particularly warm welcome to you. As I said yesterday, we'd also particularly like to welcome the people who have been furloughed or been made redundant recently. There are thousands of people in our industry who are going through a bit of a hard time at the moment. One of the things we wanted to do with the event, partly by making it free, but also by having this networking functionality, is for those people to get a leg up in the industry and maybe open up new opportunities for them. So if you encounter those people today during the networking sessions, please make every effort to lend them a helping hand, maybe an introduction at your company, maybe it could be an introduction to somebody else's. We made this announcement yesterday and it seems to have worked for a few people. No confirmations on job offers yet, but somebody did message to say that this had been particularly useful. So please make every effort to help them out. It could be any of us, as I think we all know. So getting used to the platform. Firstly, please do this. Add your LinkedIn or your Twitter profile to your profile on this platform. That way, it's going to make it easier to connect with the people you meet. Also, fill in, your company and your job title. That would be particularly useful. What people will be able to search for you within the chat, and it makes it much easier if people are able to identify which company people are working from. During the networking sessions, please have your cam and mic on. Turns out it's quite a lot of fun. I have to admit, I was one of the people who was slightly weirded out by the prospect of essentially doing chat roulette, but it turns out that it's actually very similar to meeting people at a normal event. And yeah, I had some great chats yesterday and over the course of the last few days. Once the content starts, the networking will end. When I say networking, what I mean is the ability to speak with somebody using your cam and mic. You will still be able to message one another. If you have any technical problems, try refreshing your browser first. Then try a different browser if that doesn't work, or contact Danique via danique@videoadnews.com. I think most people yesterday, the vast majority were fine, but there were 1 or 2 people who had problems, and usually these were fixed by doing what I just said. Okay, so big thank you to our partners. Like all of you, this has been a difficult year for us as an event organizer, and these companies have enabled us to provide this for free. They've also, the support is extra appreciated in a particularly difficult year. In terms of our own housekeeping, we're not going out of business, but we will be rebranding. The Video Ad News brand is one that has served us well over the years, but as we want to sort of expand the publication and move into new areas, we felt that it might be time for a new name. So our new name is, and I think most of you probably know this already, Video Week. So what will Video Week be? And again, I'm slightly conscious that people were listening to this yesterday, but so it gives me a chance to rehearse my brilliant sales pitch to you. So Video Week is going to have a few different other components beyond the publication. The publication itself will be expanding. We're hoping to produce more content. Video Week research is something that we're particularly excited about. We've started work on our first project already on the CTV advertising landscape in Europe. We're particularly excited about that. One of the things we want to do with Video Week research is to produce authentic, honest research. Not PR dressed up as research. We want to produce accurate research that reflects the market and people can relate to when they read it. Moving on to the VideoWeek podcast. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We've had great feedback on that so far, and the idea is to try and bring in different views and to have slightly more long-form conversations with leading people in the industry. We've had some fantastic guests so far, some of whom are speaking at the event, of course. Then we've got VideoWeek Learn. That's going to be an e-learning platform that we're launching next year. So if your company would like to sponsor a course, for example, it might be how to use your platform, or if you'd like to maybe sponsor some independent content that might be on the landscape. We'll also be producing independent content so that, you know, if you are onboarding 20 juniors, as I hope you all will be next year, you'll be able to put them on this platform and be able to get them trained up in video and TV fairly quickly. Finally, VideoWeek Bulletin will be a place for making announcements. We don't get to cover every story. Sometimes there's minor press releases, but we do realize that sometimes those stories have value to people, and we want to have a place for those where that will be clearly labeled as being that the content there is sponsored only. But we want to have a repository for people to be able to make sure that their announcements are heard, even if they aren't necessarily headline news. Okay, so how can you connect with us? You can connect with me on LinkedIn or follow the VideoWeek page on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to the VideoWeek podcast on your podcast app of choice. And finally, you can follow Video Ad News on Twitter. Right, so finally, we're getting to the content. Now you can get rid of me for a little bit, although I'll be back fairly soon with Sorrell. Okay, so today's content focuses on measurement, identity, and ethics. Three of the most crucial industries. I think these are the industries, you know, we covered CTV yesterday, which is always an ongoing issue, but I think that these three areas are very much 2020 in a nutshell. Measurement, of course, I don't think I need to explain to anyone why we need to get that right. Identity, again, one of the most crucial issues as GDPR and regulators close in. And ethics, we're looking at both the role of social platforms in societies, and we're also looking at racial diversity. And for that session, we've taken the approach of having a conversation between the WFA's diversity ambassador, Belinda J. Smith, who will be speaking to Dominic Joseph from Captify. And the idea was to have a conversation about CEOs generally trying to make change at his company with somebody who has been working the diversity thing. We feel like the diversity conversation is sometimes framed in adversarial terms, and we feel that there isn't a huge amount of need for that. I think occasionally there probably is, but more often than not, I think people are trying to get this right, and we wanted to have a conversation where, yeah, it was a reciprocal exchange. So again, today we've tried to balance out the agenda to make it fun and enjoyable for you, as well as being informative, of course. But we know that, you know, watching these things on a screen isn't quite the same as being in a conference hall, and so we have content that is also just designed to be enjoyable for you to sort of give your brain a bit of a break. So probably a little less presentations and stats and hardcore conversations, but there are some excellent sessions today, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Right, we'll crack on with the content, and I will jump over to Sir Martin, as if by magic. Okay, so Martin, S4 Capital's market cap has sort of grown to over £2 billion. Now you're up to, that's about roughly about 25% of WPP's market cap. How have you managed to scale, you know, the business so quickly this time around? And how long do you think it'll be before you grow to a comparable size of WPP? You know, might we even one day see you returning to WPP and saying, you know, I'm back and I've, you know, reacquiring the company?
That's extremely doubtful. I mean, there are nice bits of WPP, but there's not much of it that we covered. I mean, there's some nice bits around VML, I think, and AKQA and digital content bits like that. There's Essence and Xaxis, which I think are good. There's Kantar World Panel, but they've already jettisoned that to Bain Capital, although Bain Capital, from what I see and hear, is sort of struggling a little bit with all that. A lot of consultants in at Bain Capital. Somebody told me that they're paying their consultants £6 million a month, would you believe, to tell them what they should have already known, or if they'd asked anybody at WPP, they could have told them. No, there aren't many bits there that we would be interested in. We're really interested in this purely digital focus, in this holy trinity, as we've probably inadequately called it. First party data driving the creation of digital advertising content, pumping that out programmatically with digital media in a continuous loop, rather like an electoral model, without an election date, if you like. Faster, better, cheaper, or speed, quality, value. Faster being about agility, better being understanding the digital ecosystem, or the balance and how the balance is shifting in it. And then lastly, efficiency. And then our fourth fundamental founding principle is around a unitary structure, one P&L. The holding companies all talk about it, but they can't deliver it. Hopeless at delivering it when you talk to clients. But we're really from the very beginning focused on that. So the reason that we've grown quickly is we're very ambitious. Our mission is to create or develop the new age, new era advertising and marketing services model. And to disrupt the old model. I mean, there's a missionary zeal here. There's something that's a bit like a sect, a weird sect of people who are determined to disrupt the old. So, grand examples like a Tesla in the automotive sector is really a software company that's disrupting the automotive sector, or Amazon in obviously online shopping or in the retail market. So it's a new model that we're trying to build. Those are grand examples, but so I don't really compare ourselves in market cap or whatever to WPP. I mean, the gap between us and WPP is closed very significantly. I think we're ranked about 150, 160 in the FTSE. I think WPP is now back to about 60, 65. So the gap is getting narrower, but that's not primarily what drives us. Is that mission around creating the new age, new era model and disrupting the old. But we're growing because where the growth is. That's the whole thing about S4, the model. Unlike WPP and unlike Saatchi's before it's not about a value-based model. There's this sort of juxtaposition between value and growth, and we're focused on growth, not growth to the exclusion of margins. We think margins are important, but like for like store growth, as retailers call it, or that's the biggest driver of total shareholder return. And people don't seem to understand that you go where the growth is. So having struggled in the last few years with WPP and the top line growth, I didn't want to be in a position where I struggled again with that. So we're growing, we're going where the growth is, and we will grow where the growth is.
And do you feel that WPP is it capable of reform? It can, the holy trinity of first-party data, digital media, and content. I mean, those components surely are.
WPP won't change unless it blows itself up. So I mean, it's like turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So Mark Reed and his crew of CBOs, as I call them, chief breakfast officers, won't vote for Christmas. They're not turkeys that vote for Christmas. Unfortunately, the only way that WPP will change is if they were prepared to step down. If they stepped down and broke the company up, then it would change. But absent that, it won't change. It'll just lumber on, adding more people at the center and more CBOs, as I call them, those chief breakfast officers, more. They don't shuffle pieces of paper anymore. They shuffle emails to one another. They drive the people inside. You talk to people inside the operating companies. It would be good if you did a little conference with the operating companies, maybe anonymously, because they won't talk publicly about it, but privately, they're beyond despair. You see the things that are happening in Australia just today. If the press just dug, or analysts dug a little bit deeply into it, they'd uncover, pick up the stones. They'd uncover an awful lot. I mean, it's pathetic, really, but it's the way of the world, I'm afraid.
So when setting out that Holy Trinity roadmap, again, first-party data, digital media, and content, Is that still the core vision, or is there, is
Yes.
there anything looming on the horizon as a fourth pillar
No,
in that?
I think our competition is not the holding companies. I think they're negligible competition there. I mean, it's the bits of the holding company. So recent tech pitch which we won was against Huge and RGA and AKQA, and so we compete with the bits that I would cover, if you like, within the holding companies. But our chief competition is Accenture. Take BMW for example. I mean, the people who are sorest about losing that. Or losing that opportunity is Accenture, but particularly because they have a very significant position with BMW already. So I would say that's where the competition is. We do compete with a Deloitte but on a limited basis, or a PW, but much less. It's Accenture. So when you think about Accenture, I mean, it's huge. We're comparing a pimple with an elephant, really, or a pimple on the elephant's backside. They're 150 billion market cap. 50 billion of revenue. We're 2.5 billion, 2.6, 2.7 billion dollars market cap, and we're 450 million dollars of revenue, so $500 million of revenue. So we're very small by comparison. So if you think about Accenture, systems integration, consulting, moving up the funnel, becoming more strategic. So coming back to your question, if there are three areas around data, around content, and digital media, I think more of a consulting capability, more of a systems integration capability. Those are the two areas where you naturally expect to see us expand, but it's sort of driven by those four principles, digital only, because that's where the growth is, the holy trinity: faster, better, cheaper, or speed, quality, value, and last but not least, the unitary structure. So that's really it. So, a bit further up the value chain, if you like, less activation and implementation, more strategic thinking, if you like, and more consulting capability and more systems integration.
Early in the year, as the pandemic sort of kicked in, you sort of felt that what we were going to see is a V-shaped recession. Now, obviously, the situation has developed considerably since then. We know a bit more about what's happening. Are there any economies or perhaps sectors within economies that you think are going to ride out the storm better than others?
Yeah, well, so, I modified that thinking. I mean, it's still V-shaped in part. So I liken it to the reverse square root. I like that analogy because it's sharp dip, sharp rise, and then a plateau. Maybe not at the level that we were before immediately. The swoosh, I don't like it as an analogy because it implies that you're going to outperform where you were pretty quickly. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's going to be more of a struggle. But then there are V-shaped parts of the economy. So tech, clearly, which is the heartland of our business, about 55% of our revenues come from tech, or healthcare, adds another 5% to make it about 60% of our businesses. Tech and healthcare, that's where we're seeing more V-shaped. Online shopping, in-home gaming and entertainment, online financial services. You look at the banks that are reporting their Q3 today or in the next few days, you'll see, I think, that their online activities, along with the online activities of most companies, have been extremely strong. So there's a more V-shaped. The U-shaped are probably sort of the sort of smaller U's, or the less bottomed U's. The smaller, the thinner U's would be around the more focused FMCGs like a L'Oreal or a Kellogg's or General Mills. Sometimes their portfolios were pre-COVID not as contemporary as they've become during COVID, if you like. But a Procter, who sold its food business, Unilever, has done quite well, but has suffered a bit on the foods side, food service and ice cream, because of lack of distribution in COVID. A L'Oreal, which are very focused, or a Colgate, very focused, has done better, around sort of oral and healthcare and pet food. So, or pets has suffered less, if you like. So that's sort of U-shaped. And then the L-shaped of travel and hospitality. I haven't noticed many chair shapes. Those are the ones that have gone off the map. But I'm sure, after the furloughs, probably some, the L shape, the chair shape tends to be, it's unkind to make these sort of observations, but sadly, when the furloughs come off, it's going to be the small and medium-sized businesses that get it in the neck, which is terrible. And I think this actually brings us to an important point around regulation. Be careful what you wish for. Those platforms, those much criticized platforms, I think unfairly criticized platforms, are the engines of small and medium-sized business growth. Jack Ma at Alibaba understands that. He continuously points this out, that Alibaba is the engine of small business, of entrepreneurial business in China. And as Alibaba expands outside China, and Alipay and the logistics platform, these are the engines of small business. Google, Facebook, Amazon should be hammering that message home to Congress and others. Be careful, in terms of, if you do regulate them, if you do break them up, if they have a detrimental impact at this time on small and medium-sized businesses, which, by the way, are the engine of employment. So a lot of the growth in employment comes from the small and medium-sized businesses. So don't kill them off.
Yeah, we're obviously seeing big moves on the antitrust side, both in Europe and in the US at the moment. Within our media industry, I think there is a feeling that they do have too much power, that they have too many different points of leverage, which they can.
So, which industry are you referring to?
Well, within
when you say our media.
Within media and advertising, I think,
Well, yeah, you have to, but that's a big industry. So, do you mean the media owners, or do you mean traditional media owners? I can understand that, but that's a bit King Canute-like, isn't it? These, like it or not, I was looking at the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, which points out, or tries to point out. It's a long film, but there's one basic message, that these platforms have too much power, and they sort of manipulate us. It's a bit like Vance Packard and Hidden Persuaders. It's a rerun of that, but in a different, to my mind, but in a different era. It was ever thus. We've had, I can remember subliminal advertising. You remember that?
Yes, yeah.
You went into a cinema, and without you knowing, they flashed, Coca-Cola at you, or Pepsi-Cola at you without you knowing, and you went out and bought gallons of Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola as a result. No, there's always been this strain. It's become more extreme because of the pervasive nature of the technology. No, I don't believe. Look, I think the platforms are behaving more responsibly. I think Google, Facebook, and Amazon, and Apple, and Microsoft, as they've gone through $1 trillion of market cap, or most of them, Facebook hasn't, but the others have, with power comes responsibility. And I think they are acknowledging that. Facebook employs, 35,000 people to monitor editorial content. They've got rid of some of the extreme groups, the Boogaloo groups, for example. They've tried to deal with hate speech. It is very difficult. It is reprehensible, These articles, as a Jew, I extremely sensitive to the point of denying the Holocaust, which I find loathsome, but or beyond loathsome, and not prepared to accept. So, I do share that view that there are extremes that have to be dealt with, but they are trying to deal with it, and it is very difficult in a concept or in an ecosystem that is so sophisticated, so big, 2 billion people or whatever it happens to be. Look at the benefits that these platforms have given in terms of connecting people. Marginal cost of information, 0. It's quite extraordinary, the revolution that has taken place and the impact that it's had on our lives. And with that, unfortunately, come some negatives that have to be dealt with. And I'm sure that, I don't happen to believe that the boycotts do much good. I think what needs to be done is regulators, our clients, have to sit down. Again, I liken it to dealing with the Chinese. You score any plus points or gain any advantage by sort of punching the Chinese in the nose in public. You do much better to talk to them, face to face. People talk about loss of face. That may or may not be true, but I think the most effective way is to sit down and talk them through your point of view. So you sit with these platforms on their councils or in these processes, and you explain your position, and changes do take place, and the companies are changing. If they were broken up, if that was to come to pass, strangely from our point of view, it's probably to our advantage. It makes the landscape more You know, if you have to deal with 3 Facebooks or 3 Amazons or 3 Googles or whatever, it makes the marketplace that much more sophisticated and complicated that an advisor such as us benefits from it. So I don't think we benefit from concentration, but I think the best way to deal with the concentration and the success of these companies, which have been extraordinary, and will continue, in my view, to be extraordinary, is by working with them to modify their behavior and their investments and the way they do things to make sure that the good outperforms or is greater than the bad.
If I was to give you a time machine, is there anything in your career that you strategically would have done differently if you could go back and
yeah, actually, you know, I was looking at the questions that you kindly sent me before. So I wrote down, I saw, you know, not to, when we acquired Ogilvy, I had convertible preference shares. I wouldn't use convertible preference shares. I'd be more careful on which chairman I was responsible in helping to choose. I wasn't solely responsible for it, so be careful who the chairman is. You know, balancing career, family, career, society, the three areas of your life that you have to balance. So being, and then I think the final point was, you know, a bit related to what you're saying about China. Probably, I remember Arnold Weinstock, Lord Weinstock. I saw him before he died, had lunch with him, and I said, "What do you regret?" And he said he had been too cautious. He was always quite famous. He ran the British General Electric, and he built Cash Mountain. He was a phenomenally, he was a detail merchant, you know. People accused me of being a micromanager. He was a micromanager, and I really admired him. I met him through my father. I remember I said, "Do you regret anything?" Exactly your, you know, sort of question that you asking me, and he said he regretted. He was very cautious. He built up big cash balances inside GE and held them at the center. Probably was a little bit over cautious on investment, and he said rather than taking a leap, he did joint ventures. So he did joint venture, I think, with Siemens and other industrial companies. Said that was a mistake. He said never make a joint company work. So he regretted not being a little bit more expansive and being too cautious. And I think probably that I would say the same in relation. I mean, this is all 2020 hindsight, but now in relation to China, I mean, we built a huge business at WPP in China at 20% market share, or India 50% market share, or Brazil, we have market dominance there. So, but I think probably on the web, not going further, faster. Again, you know, it's a bit the old Bill Gates thing about, you know, you always underestimate the pace of technology or the pace of change. So I think probably the answer is if it's possible, go further, faster.
Yeah.
You always, I think you always get into situations where, you know, you always have the doubting Thomases, which are always good to have because they bring you back to earth, and they always, but you know, the Dr. Death, I remember at Sarge's there was a guy called David Perring, who we christened him Dr. Death, because, you know, whenever we were going to make a major decision, we all wheeled David in, and he would always give us the reasons why we shouldn't do something. And so you've always got to have Dr. Death, but you mustn't let it dominate your thinking.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of anxiety in the industry about what's going to happen now with the pandemic and the accompanying recessions. What advice would you give to people in terms of riding out the years to come?
Let me get I've got a bit more juice. I'm getting a flash that we're lower. Well, you know, we're in a very privileged position because we've pegged out a strategy more by luck than judgment, which is designed in a way to navigate the pandemic. And the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation at a consumer level, as you know, online shopping, online education, financial services, in-home games and entertainment. All these things have been accelerated, communications online, moving from live events to virtual events. I mean, all this has accelerated acceptance of digital transformation. At a media level, it's just accelerated all the trends. Disney today is announcing that it's going to focus on streaming. Dan Loeb writes to them, Nelson Peltz writes to them and says focus on online and or on streaming. And they're going to do that. Bob Chapek just announced, that's where they're going to focus on. So the streamers, Netflix and them, the newspapers and magazines, the decline of paper versions has been accelerated. The decline of traditional outdoor has been accelerated. And then third area, enterprise, enterprise digital transformation. If there were people were resisting and saying, well, we're doing okay, before COVID, we're doing fine. We're growing our top line by 2, 3, or 4%. We're being a bit more efficient. We're buying back stock. Our EPS is up 5 to 10%. That's fine. Well, that gets blown out of the water by 2020 and COVID. Look at the holding companies. A disaster, walking disasters. By the way, if the holding companies can't grow next year, they never will. I mean, if there's 1 year when, with this GDP to recover where they should, it might be a false dawn. It might be the canary in the coal mine. But if they can't grow next year, then they are the walking dead. But so next year, it should be possible. GDP growth is going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%, depending on which part of the world you are. Probably average for the world 4 or 5%. I think the OECD report today on how they see the economy for next year. But the bounce next year maybe won't continue into 2022. I think we'll go back to where we were pre-pandemic, maybe, but with a vaccine hopefully in by Q2 of next year. But I think that's the sort of the background to where we will be.
So Martin, that was a fantastic start to the day. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Pleasure. Hope it's, and good luck to you.
Hello and welcome to this session on Origin and the future of cross-media measurement. I will let you judge at the end of the session whether you think the project lives up to the billing, but this is certainly, we think, the biggest, most significantly widely backed solution to the problem of cross-media measurement that the industry has been wrestling with for 10 or maybe even 15 years. So it's a slightly daunting prospect, but I will try and keep it simple in terms of what we're trying to achieve with a program that's global and UK driven, and tell you a little bit about where we've got to on the journey, who we're traveling with, where we're trying to get to, and why we think this is something that is really important for the industry. My name is Richard Halton. I am the project director working for ISBA, the Society of British Advertisers. They are critically driving this program on behalf of the advertiser community, but working with platforms, broadcasters, media agencies, measurement companies, to try and establish a common approach to cross-media measurement that can be adopted in the UK and hopefully in markets across the world. So first of all, I just thought to set the scene, we should talk about where this initiative has come from. And it's work that's been developed within ISBA and with the IPA over the last 2 or so years, backed by ISBA's hundreds of members, but with a specific advertiser advisory group that includes some of the brands up on the slide now. These brands are companies that obviously are spending across multiple media and looking for the most effective way of reaching consumers while respecting the different value of each kind of media in the mix. Advertiser backed is also important in terms, I think, of this initiative having cut through in the way that perhaps media measurement initiatives haven't had in the past. If you like, crudely put, follow the money. This is where the money comes into the advertising system. And these are the brands that want to see how that money is being spent. But they're also an important community who are, if you like, neutral and able to resolve tensions, issues, disputes around how things are measured, what's measured. And our job at ISBA is to work collaboratively with them, with platforms and with broadcasters to find a solution that works for the whole media industry. So the program has at its back a global framework developed by the World Federation of Advertisers to try and articulate what it is that we mean when we talk about cross-media measurement. And advertisers came together in the autumn of 2019 to talk about what did they mean when they said cross-media measurement. And what they've set out is quite an ambitious set of goals. We call it the North Star, around their ability to plan, report, optimize media across the whole life cycle, to have data reporting that is continuous, always on, comprehensive across all media, and that will over time enable us to understand advertising impact all the way through to outcomes. Now, if that sounds a very ambitious list, that's because it is. It's deliberately set at the sort of peak North Star ambition. But we've prioritized within that list of needs to a day one set of requirements focused on video and display and the ability to deduplicate reach and frequency. Now, media measurement doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are lots of issues that arise, not least around the consumer and privacy, and also from an industry perspective of making sure that any measurement system is fair, based on trusted and transparent metrics. And so the solution that we've set out to define isn't just about meeting the advertiser's needs, it's also about doing that in a way that works for the consumer and can be trusted by the whole industry. So that set of industry requirements and advertiser needs taken together represent the overall North Star that's been set by the WFA. And that framework was developed in the spring of this year and was published in September and is available on the Origin website, also at the WFA website. The ambition set by the WFA wasn't just about a set of goals. It was also trying to articulate how that framework could be delivered. And media measurement, as we've referred to already, has a lot to do with governance and making sure that there's a trusted, transparent, audited framework. It requires new thinking about technology, because media platforms today are sophisticated, capable of producing incredibly granular data, and the challenge is to come up with a solution that marries the detail of first-party impression level data with the trusted technologies of reporting linear TV. We also have articulated within the framework how we're going to address issues of privacy and protecting the rights of consumers, and then some thoughts on standards and metrics. And when we talk about cross-media metrics, what are the common identifying metrics and reporting frameworks that the industry can unite around? So the solution to cross-media measurement has been debated over the years. Is the answer to wait until all data can be reduced to ones and zeros and report digitally? Or is the answer to build big panels and try and capture the richness of different audiences' behavior across multiple devices purely from a metering or panel-based solution? What's been developed as part of the work by the WFA and that we're now interrogating through the work we're doing on Project Origin is actually a hybrid solution. So it takes the best of the panel solution, a complete view of all viewing that works to calibrate behaviours across the population. So no claiming that there are 75 million people living in the UK, and combines that with the richness of first-party data, which we are going to develop by creation of a virtual model of the UK. So imagine fusing a panel data set and infusing that with the individual data of each panelist to create a statistical model of the whole of the UK. And then individual publishers and broadcasters are able to run their data against that virtual ID model, and advertisers can then see how individual identities within that virtual model have been reached and deduplicate those impressions to give a deduplicated view of reach and frequency, and also of duration of view. So there's a lot more available online articulating the technical solution. And our job at Origin has been to interrogate that and look at how we might adopt it for real in the UK market. So that's the global framework that's been established by the WFA, with involvement from teams in the UK and the Origin group in particular. Origin is the name specifically for the UK project to implement the WFA framework. And the ambition is that this will act as a blueprint for multiple markets. We're one of two countries developing a cross-media measurement solution based on the WFA framework, the US with the ANA being the other one. And in order to do that, we've brought together a large consortium of interests, so ISBA representing advertisers, media agencies as represented by the IPA, digital platforms, the brands that you can see here, and broadcasters. And we've been working together as a group since around about this time last year, first of all, to establish an alliance between these different communities, to talk about what might be measured, how that might be governed, and to look at the emerging proposals being developed by the WFA. And now the work we're doing at the moment, the second phase of work, has been about taking the framework, which I've just described developed by the WFA, to validate that. So kicking the tires, if you like, to check that it could work. Looking at how the UK TV market can be represented within a broader cross-media measurement framework, and thinking about how that could be made to work from a governance and funding perspective. And during that period of validation, we've been thinking about ways in which we could prove the solution, and take the question, if you like, from could it work to does it work? And so the next stage of the project is to try and develop a pilot, an end-to-end prototype of the solution, and look at how we can then scale that up to something that could be implemented with an agreed set of quality and audit under the aegis of a new venture. And we would expect that phase of work to take us right the way through 2021 and into 2022. So just to sort of visualize that a little bit, if you like, to begin with, we started off with a high-level design at the top left, the WFA blueprint. The work we're doing at the moment is to turn that into a detailed design, look at how that could be developed into actual components. And then the next phase of work is to build a working prototype, initially with synthetic data, to test the end-to-end plumbing, check that the data we expect to see come out based on the data that went in is correct, and then look at what it would take to scale that solution and what it would cost to operate at the same time as building out our thinking on how that would be governed and funded. And that prototype, I think, will tell us a lot about the feasibility of this solution at scale. And once we move beyond that to agreed set of exit criteria, we'll be able to start onboarding publishers, doing real data end-to-end tests, looking at the tools that we can surface data with to input data into advertisers or media agencies, and looking at how we audit for quality and performance across the data process and the outputs that we're generating. So it's a really ambitious program. The solution is being developed across multiple markets because it's designed to leverage some consistent global components as well as local components, and we need to coordinate across both of those. But we're building this in phases deliberately to try and build confidence, to establish a solution design, to validate that, if you like, as a desk exercise, and then via a prototype, and then to start to scale it and learning to build a solution that's effective and high quality that you would expect of any media measurement system. And I think part of that will be adhering to the standards of measurement organizations that already exist around the world. I think it's important that this has a clear focus on the needs of advertisers. If you like, that's the tie-breaking voice in any conversation about this system and solution and how it's designed. And I think it's also really exciting that this has been developed in the UK. The UK has a long track record of creating blueprints in the television industry, whether it's platforms, services, technology, standards. And I think the UK market is particularly well suited to pioneer a solution like this that can be adopted in other markets. And we spend a good proportion of our time talking to colleagues across the world who are watching what we're doing and are interested with a view to adopting something similar of their own. And that's a conversation that we're managing alongside our development work, collaborating with the WFA. So it's a really big, very important program. It's caught the imagination of advertisers. It has very close engagement across the sales side, increasingly close working with agency groups as we start to think about how we integrate the data. And I think as we do more to build out a solution and can demonstrate it and build confidence in that, you'll see more and more kind of energy and excitement about the program as we build towards that goal in the summer of 2021. For anyone who would like to know more, there's a website at www.originmediameasurement.co.uk, and come online, have a look at the documents that we've got out there. We'll continue to build a repository of information, and you can get in touch with us via that site. So for now, thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our panel on advertising's identity crisis. Are we ready for the privacy compliant world? Obviously, this is going to be one of the big ones for NVF this year because identity has been at the top of most of the industry's agenda since Google's announcement at the start of the year. And I think it says a lot that even amid a pandemic, that's not really managed to shove identity that far down the agenda. It's still a priority for everyone. And the hope for this panel is that we'll take quite a clear and honest look at where we're at the moment in terms of finding solutions to the upcoming demise of third-party cookies, as well as sort of the industry's regulatory moves towards privacy. So we're joined by three wonderful panelists today who I'll let introduce themselves. Anna, we'll start with you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ana Milicevic. I'm the principal and co-founder of management consultancy Sparrow Advisers. We're based in the US, but a global consultancy, and we help everyone in the ecosystem from media owners, technology companies, brands, agencies, etc., including investors, figure out how to solve problems like identity and similar strategic challenges.
Brilliant. Asha?
Hi, my name's Asha Neuville. I work for Dell. I'm the global DSP manager, and my role is really to work as a consultant for all of our different business units around the world, helping them to put in place their programmatic strategies in their marketing campaigns.
David.
Hi, I'm David. I work for Channel 4. I'm the Deputy Head of Digital and Innovation, and my remit is to run the digital sales team and develop the digital strategy and the data strategy across the channel from a commercial point of view.
Fabulous, thank you all. So to start off with, I want to just look at, I don't want to get too into the weeds with this, but I think it's important to think about what's really driving this push towards privacy, because I guess whatever is driving it is what has to be satisfied. If it's coming from consumers, then we need to make sure what we create is good for consumers. If it's coming from Apple solely, then we need to satisfy Apple, I guess. So where do you all think this push towards privacy is really coming from? Is it consumer driven?
I'll take this one first. It's really a strange mixed bag. I think there's very little awareness on the consumer side of how advertising actually works and what it enables. And at the same time, there's this really big perception of tracking as an instant negative. And I think with the most recent Apple iOS changes and the IDFA changes, that's going to just get emphasized because now you're showing a consumer a few inches from their face, hey, do you want this random app to track you? And that sounds really creepy. But what isn't really getting highlighted is what the consumer is getting in return. And I think as an industry, we've really done a very poor job on this front over the last 20 or so years of explaining how advertising actually powers a lot of really cool content and really cool experiences. So it's a really interesting challenge now with the identity, where it seems to, as most things do these days, benefit the incumbents in large platforms and technology companies. But it is being positioned as, hey, this is really something that the consumer wants. And I have to ask, is this really something that the consumer wants?
I mean, David, I'd be interested in your perspective, for Channel 4's digital platforms, do you think privacy and privacy protection on those platforms is high up your users' agendas?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with some of what Anna's saying, but I think it is a major issue for consumers. I think consumers have over time become much more aware of their privacy rights, and they do feel followed, I think, and they haven't necessarily given those permissions in a knowing way, I don't think. So there is certainly an increased awareness of being tracked across the internet, across multiple sites, and it can feel a bit creepy if you're looking at a medical site, and then suddenly you're on another site, and something that's quite a private issue suddenly pops up. It's not necessarily a great experience, especially on the desktop and the mobile platform, I think. But yeah, in answer to your question, for Channel 4, it's always been of paramount importance to us. We very much we don't own any data. It's our viewers' data, and we very much look at it in that respect and frame it like that. So this can't come soon enough, really, from a sort of broadcaster point of view. We think this is a really positive move from a regulation point of view.
Yeah. So obviously, there's a whole bunch of different, trends that can be grouped together as a push towards privacy. But like I said in the intro, it was Google's announcement about ending support for third-party cookies on Chrome that was really the big one, because of Chrome's sort of high use rate, I guess. Obviously, Safari was already doing it. Firefox had already started doing it as well, I think. But when Chrome got on board, that was the big one that was like, this isn't optional anymore. You have to do this. So with the death of third-party cookies specifically, I guess one thing that a lot of people maybe are still struggling to understand is what exactly does that change? What does that look like in running a digital ad campaign? Asha, maybe that's a good one for you. How does that change your programmatic strategies, and how big a role do cookies currently play?
So at the moment, cookies obviously incredibly important for us. We do a lot of retargeting. I think we try to be as responsible as we can with the way we do our retargeting, to respect people's privacy. But obviously, we do follow people around. I'm not going to say we don't. If you've ever been on our website, you probably will then have seen a Dell ad somewhere else. So I think that's going to be one of the things that is going to affect us the most, is how do we, post 2022, how do we manage retargeting? Because it works. It works really well, and it's a campaign that we run in pretty much every single country globally, and it's always on. So that's the one that we've really got to think about, because that's going to go. And so we're just going to have to think of some completely different way, and we're going to have to just reinvent what we're doing there. But the other thing we are looking at a lot is our first party data. So we've got a big emphasis on first party data. Obviously, being Dell, the Dell model was built on the fact that we know our customers. And so we have got a lot of first party data. And so for that, it's going to be simpler for us and maybe some of our competitors to be able to use that data. So I think that's some of the things that we need to look at, and then also partnering with publishers who have got first party data, trying to test out, what data have they got that we can use, and how we're going to pivot to being able to use their data a bit more going into the future.
David, how about you? How big are cookies at the moment for a broadcaster like Channel 4?
I mean, we're in quite a unique, well, not unique, but we're in a different position to lots of other publishers, in that we haven't been reliant on third-party cookies for some time now. We have we have a logged in single ID point, if you like, for our viewers, so we know which platform that they're watching on, irrelevant of the device or the platform. I mean, the thing that makes our, I suppose, position even more different from lots of other publishers is that lots of our viewing takes place on the big screen. So about 70% of all of our viewing is on big screen devices, which obviously aren't cookie enabled. There's no cookie syncing that goes on those, and we don't actually play in the open RTB space, where there's obviously a sharing of data. So we've actually recently just launched a programmatic guaranteed offering that isn't reliant on third-party cookies. So what at a time when lots of advertisers are moving away from, or will have to move away from, the open RTB space, we've been working hard, behind the scenes to launch a kind of brand safe programmatic solution that isn't reliant on the open market.
Mm-hmm. And just quickly, what's your thoughts? Like, is the change from cookies, and as well, I guess Apple's changes to IDFA, are they as seismic as they're being painted to be?
Yeah, I think
sorry,
go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to jump. So I think Ash has made that point that it's huge for advertisers that have been spending in that way in the past.
Yeah, and I think what we're not seeing just yet is just how much work internally all different constituents in the ecosystem will need to do, starting from brands. To Asha's earlier point, like, you now need to look and reevaluate whether the technology bets that you've made still make sense, and be really satisfied that the technology partner that you're working with is going to be able to support a cookieless or the post third-party cookie scenario. And many vendors are messaging to market that they are in fact ready for no cookies, but they're really not.
Yeah.
And so there's an operational challenge there that's going to require a lot of internal work and reevaluation of not just tech partners, but all sorts of execution partners, and potentially some realignment on internal teams, how they're structured, how they're incentivized to really make sense of the post-cookie world. So I think that's a tremendous amount of work that's coming our way at now a pretty clearly defined timeline. So yeah, it's going to be a fun 2 years.
So in terms of looking at progress being made on solutions, I want to start by looking at Google's Privacy Sandbox, because it's quite interesting how they framed it. They announced the Privacy Sandbox first, and then their blog post announcing that they'd end support for third-party cookies was framed kind of like, oh, well, we're going to find alternatives in the Privacy Sandbox anyway. So given that's going to happen, we might as well stop supporting third-party cookies because they're not that privacy safe. And then we've set this deadline for 2022. But how would you guys rate progress so far? We've seen a few solutions come out. We've seen some like working trials of those, I guess. How do you rate progress out of the sandbox?
Specifically out of the Google one, or
sandbox, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's still we've still got quite a way to go. I don't think that we're making progress as fast as we would like. I think as a brand, obviously, I look at the timelines that we've got in front of us. We've just got, I don't know what, it's October 2020. We've got just over a year. There's nothing to really test properly just yet and really get our teeth into. I mean, we're starting to look at things. We are looking at it. We're setting up our ads data hub and starting to, I don't think test is the right word, but starting to put our feet in there and to see what we can do. But I think that as I start to look at next year, and we're already planning for next year, we're planning for the first half of next year. Once our plans are done for the first half of next year, we've then got the second half. So a year isn't very long in this world. And I feel that I'm starting to get a little bit nervous that there are not a lot of solutions out there that are ready. And I think Google aren't ready either. And when you hear them talk about it, when you speak to them, they don't have all the answers just yet. And I'm not saying that I expect them to have all the answers just yet. I think we've still got a long way to go. But I don't know, it just seems a long way, but not too far.
I think you've hit on something that I think is incredibly important here. So the needs of very large brands with significant budgets and global footprints are quite different than the needs of smaller brands, region-specific brands, the SMB and long tail portion of the ecosystem. And so far, we've all been using more or less the same technology, certainly the same exchange technology, the same buying technology. And one of the things that I'm thinking will emerge out of this reconstitution post third-party cookies is really a bifurcation in terms of what the larger spenders are using and how they're going to market, with more direct relationships with publishers, with more direct deals that way, versus how everybody else is going to market. And so in the US, that would be, you know, the 100 largest advertisers or so. In the UK, it's probably the 25 largest advertisers, maybe 50. In smaller regions, that number will vary and the cutoff will vary, but I do think we are going to start seeing two very different ecosystems emerge. Initially, two for the, you know, the large global brands who can maintain these direct relationships with publishers, and then those for whom marketing can maybe be more of an autopilot type solution. And I think that's going to be a very interesting, perhaps frightening shift.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well, and I think that, you know, there seems to be lots of different solutions that are all being built, none of which are quite ready yet from a, you know, from a kind of universal ID perspective. But it feels that those solutions do sort of start creating what has gone before, whereas I think, you know, some of the clean room approaches might be where we see the biggest growth. And I think, you know, to your point, Asha, you must have a load of first party data already, but I can imagine that's a massive focus for you and every other client out there now, to make sure that if all these solutions don't work, then there can be kind of partnerships with other, you know, with publishers on a more direct basis, because that's going to become more and more important. So if all these things, you know, fall over in the future, then there is still an opportunity to use your own data to identify users in a smart way.
Yeah, I mean, we'll turn to other solutions. I guess, Asha, you sort of hinted earlier, asking, you know, we're talking about Google Sandbox. You know, one question is, how comprehensive is Google's solution? If we do get good and usable tools out of the Sandbox, is that problem solved, or do we still have a problem of balancing lots of different solutions for different parts of the internet?
Yeah, we're still going to have a problem. Google, I mean, if Google come up with the perfect solution, wonderful, great, perfect. But it's not perfect because it will only be perfect for the Google ecosystem. They're not going to be working with Facebook and Amazon and, you know, LinkedIn and the other big walled gardens. So, you know, we're going to end up having to have the Google Sandbox, the Facebook Sandbox, the Amazon Sandbox, and then all of the others that are starting to get, you know, down. So where does it end? You know, so I feel that, you know, you kind of looked at this and thought, okay, this could actually be a really great opportunity for us to create a much more open and collaborative system, but we're actually going to be recreating the same thing in a different way. And I think that's one of the things I'm slightly concerned about as we look at this, is that we don't just, you know, from your first question, it's like, was this user driven? And let's say it was user driven, it's because our users are worried about their privacy being impeached on and what have you. Well, we have to be careful that we don't just recreate the same environment again, and that in 2027 we come back with another announcement from Google saying, okay, now we're doing this because what we've done isn't right, and people are doing some kind of blocking of the new solution, and we have to, you know, restart again. And that's something I'm a little bit thinking, I really hope we don't, you know, have Groundhog Day here.
I wish there was something I could click to like send hearts and agreement on TikTok here, because I that's you're 110% spot on. It's exactly what's possibly going to happen, and it's such a gnarly challenge because cookies are a very inappropriate foundation for a lot of transactions going through them, and a really, really healthy advertising economy. So to your point, if we just kind of go, all right, we're not calling them cookies anymore, we're now calling them something else, and nothing else changes, then
the brownies now.
Yes, exactly. It's brownies. Yay, everybody. It's just not gonna do us any favors in the mid to long term.
Yeah, I think, look, the number of the problem is, you know, there's a consumer kind of cry saying, stop following me. You know, that's what is coming out loud and clear. If someone starts saying stop following me, and then you find a new way of following them, it almost becomes even more intrusive, I think. So
Yeah.
I think it's time for for us all to make sure that as an industry we listen to consumers, because like you say, otherwise I think we're going to end up in a worse trust position in the future.
Yeah. I've been thinking that like for me, a good example of like consumers caring about privacy but not necessarily the specifics is like how, you know, people that you talk to, normal people outside of the industry, will talk about, you know, Facebook and their use of data, because Facebook will say we don't sell user data, and you know that's true from what we know. But you know, if you tell, I have told my friends, oh, they don't actually sell your data, they just let advertisers use it. But most people don't care about that. They still say, okay, well, that's the same thing. So it's, you know, I think it's very important that the industry remembers it's, you know, normal people don't really know the specifics of the tech that's, you know, different, and they care about the outcomes. So looking at sort of outside of the sandboxes and these universal ID solutions that are, you know, designed to work with the open web, there's a bunch of them out there. We were mapping them out in our OTT guide a few weeks ago. I guess a lot of what I'm hearing from people is that it's just difficult to choose which of these to go with, because there's quite similar solutions doing quite similar things. What do you guys make of the solutions we're seeing out there, and how do you choose between the competing solutions?
I think that goes back to Asha's point about how if we're just recreating what we've done before, we're not really making progress. And so for us, when we advise clients, we tend to generally inform them of the, you know, overall state of the identity marketplace and where we're seeing innovation coming from. And then it's really you know, you have to choose the best framework for the next you know, roughly like 2 to 3 years is the time frame that you're thinking of, because a lot of this is happening very rapidly. And so even if you pick a framework that works for you today or the next 6 months, there may be something in the future that would require a change. So there's a lot of conversations around flexibility and around what's ultimately important and priority for any given company that's considering these kinds of solutions today.
Yeah, I mean the kind of bet that we've taken is the clean room approach. So we've recently integrated with InfoSum to enable us to use our first party data, and then other advertisers to use their first party data to match and identify those users on our platform. There seems to be a decent kind of growth of publishers who are launching integrations with them. I mean, ITV recently announced, Global Radio, Telegraph. So it feels like that's quite a smart bet, and I think we're probably going to see more of that. I mean, the Ozone project is quite interesting as well, from the press publishers. You know, creating common currencies that can be brought across kind of premium news publishers as well. So I think we'll probably see more use of contextual, but as a kind of shared currency, if you like. So I think that's definitely going to be something that's going to continue to grow in the future as well, I think.
I just always have flashbacks to like every publisher group that has failed in the past, like Pangea and who knows what else. But I think that's you're spot on. It's a really worthwhile concept now. And what I really like about clean rooms is, to Asha's earlier point, if we do end up in this scenario where we now have, you know, multiple walled gardens and there's, you know, an increasing number of them, that's really the only type of approach that can kind of, in a meaningful way and not without breaking the bank on just, you know, data warehouse costs, actually solve the problem across multiple walled gardens. So I love that approach.
David, I think broadcasters like yourself and a lot of the premium publishers are in a particularly good position because of how, with the type of content you have a much easier time getting users logged on, and you can collect some data there and you have their email. Can you just talk a bit about how Channel 4 is using that and the solution that you're going to be using going forward?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we started to ask our viewers to log in or sort of, you know, share their data about 10 years ago now, which seems like a lifetime ago. But 5 years ago, we made it mandatory. So on all our owned and operated platforms, 100% of users who watch our content are logged in. So there's a bunch of kind of viewer attribution data that they give us, their name, email address, age, gender and location. And then on top of that, we also obviously have the viewing consumption data. We know what they're watching and the device they're watching on, the time of day, and then we know the history of viewing as well. So that's been really useful for our data science team to be able to build a set of products that we've sold against and advertisers been able to buy, which are demographically interest based, where we kind of use a panel to then build out interests, and then also contextual, the obvious one that we were always selling on previously. But more recently, we've moved to make that data suite a lot smarter. So I mentioned the integration that we've got with InfoSum, and we've launched a product called Brand Match, which enables advertisers to bring their own first-party data and match that in a really safe and compliant manner, so they can identify either the users that they already know about, or they can do the inverse of that and do prospecting to identify new customers. And then the other two products that we launched, an approved product where we allow advertisers who don't necessarily have lots of first-party data to buy off-the-shelf segments from approved data sources. So we've got an integration with Axiom as well. And then finally, something called Bespoke, which allows advertisers to use our own first-party data and then sort of layer it on top of each other. So you might be able to target, people who love Formula One and watch on a mobile device. I mean, I'm making this up, but there's kind of endless opportunities there.
Yeah. I guess it's, we should look at the buy side as well. Actually, you've already said that, first party data is a big focus for you guys at the moment. Like, how does that look in terms of, have you always been quite first party data focused, and how is that working out as you kind of place more focus on that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, Dell's model has been about having that customer data. When Michael Dell created the company way back, he wanted us to be able to talk directly to our customers, because he understood the value of having that customer data. And I mean, that was 30 odd years ago now. And I think today it's even more true. We've got an awful lot of data. We have invested a lot in our DMP solutions, in working with Salesforce to be able to use that. We're creating today a much more connected customer journey, and trying to work out how we can orchestrate across the whole of a customer's life cycle and their journey through the Dell website, picking up all of their little bits of data points and making something that is actually interesting for them and relevant for them by using all of that data. If we didn't have their data, we wouldn't be able to even start looking at that. I'm not saying what we do is perfect. I mean, we've still got a lot of work to do on it, but we're looking at creating those identity links. So with like a digital keyring to be able to help us going into the future, not have to use cookies and still be able to communicate to them on a very much a one-to-one personalized basis. So it's something that's really important for us.
So based on the progress we're seeing made within the sandboxes by the sort of the universal ID solutions, and that you guys are sort of working on internally, where do you think, I know there's still so many unknowns about how these things will progress, but where do you guys think this all shakes out when Google's deadline hits in 2022? Do you think things will look fundamentally different? And as you've already suggested, maybe some of that's good if we lose certain of the creepier aspects of digital advertising. Or do you think we're going to get to a place where you can pretty much do what you can do today? It just works a bit different technically.
I'd like to think it would be very fundamentally different, but I think we're going to recreate what we know, because that's how we do things. I think people are going to be too scared to say, how can I not retarget? I need to be able to retarget. And working in programmatic, we see how difficult it is to change the traditional marketers' attitudes towards marketing. Just helping take people on the journey from traditional marketing to digital and programmatic has been really hard. So now that we've got them to think that this is the new norm, now I've got to say to them, okay, well now you've got to change again. So I think it's going to take more of a shift, and I think people are trying to recreate the same thing, which as I said before, I'm not sure that's the best idea, but I think that's probably where we were going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to have the same KPIs that we're going to need to kind of hit somehow. And that's what's really making that type of, well, wait a minute, in this new world, what could we be doing differently type thinking. Very, on the one hand, very risky, and on the other hand, really hard to execute internally.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything points to the walled gardens becoming stronger, doesn't it? And I think first party data will become more and more important, and the long tail in the long run, I think, will suffer, because I think those publishers who are possibly mopping up lots of revenue from the open RTB market, from advertisers who are targeted on sales and getting click-throughs. I think it's going to be hard for them to do that when they're asking people to register if their content's not strong enough.
Mm. One aspect that I want to touch on before we wrap up, that is very important to the conversation, is regulation. I've spoken to, which is obviously a whole other aspect of it. I've spoken to some people recently who have had an attitude of, GDPR is a few years gone now. We're pretty much out of the woods with it, but we still see some pretty big developments. There was the story a few weeks back about, well, the EU Privacy Shield was struck down by EU court the Privacy Shield was struck down by an EU court this summer, and Facebook, for example, uses that as a legal basis for transferring data, and there's been suggestions that if Facebook can't do that, then they can't operate their businesses in Europe, which would be huge. And as much as it's a huge subject that could have its own panel, just like as briefly as you can, do you think there's still more to come on the regulatory side, and that we'll see more pushes towards privacy from the regulators?
Well, most definitely. I think with GDPR, it's a really, really useful framework, and kind of the first of its kind, certainly at the level of a multi-country effort. But with implementation, a lot of companies approached it from, oh, let's just make sure that I'm in compliance, as opposed to, oh, so this is a different way to think about data usage rights. That I prefer that to privacy, because privacy implies that it's something fluffy and not well defined and could be optional, versus what we're really talking about here is this consumer doesn't want to feel like they're being tracked somewhere else, like they're being followed around, etc. And the consumer needs to have some sort of agency to opt out of that. So I think we've now seen the first slew of GDPR lawsuits, major lawsuits filed against significant vendors in the space, and I expect that trend to continue, as the law really lets you challenge the basic tenets of how data transfers work. We're also seeing an increase in activity here in the US with CCPA, which is our first foray into this type of regulation. So far, California only, California specific. But it's pretty easy to imagine a nightmare scenario where every state in the United States has its own version of GDPR type regulation, which would in effect destroy the common market here. And then, China has its first version of a data protection law. I think it just came out last week, I want to say. So there's a lot of activity like that in different regions where local regulators are starting to look at the same problem that we're all experiencing and giving it a local flavor. So I think we're just going to be seeing more and more activity like that throughout the world. And that if we approach it from that, let's just do whatever we need to do to tick off the compliance box, as opposed to, to Asha's and to David's point earlier, that, we have an opportunity here to rethink a lot of how the mechanics of this work, then we'll just be in that Groundhog Day mode forever.
Yeah. So finally, just to wrap up, David, you hinted earlier that you think are going to be the winners and losers of all this. Asha and Anna, who do you think comes out well of the overall privacy push, and who comes out not quite so well?
I think it's the Googles, Facebooks, Amazons. They're the ones that are gonna be successful coming out of this. I think the small independents are going to be the ones that are going to lose out, unfortunately.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is always the way that the ecosystem is set up right now is to always favor the large walled gardens and platforms. So whatever happens in market, they somehow end up winning more and more share of ad spend, of attention, of whatever KPI metric you want. But I'll also add to Asha's conclusion that I think consumers are going to lose too. Because if we lose the open internet, there's a lot of content and engagement and fun stuff that people enjoy using today that just isn't going to be able to commercially survive in the future if we don't figure this out. No pressure, just, you know.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, that was all very positive.
Yeah.
That's, I'm afraid, all we have time for, but I really enjoyed this chat. So thank you very much to all my panelists.